Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Haley Spierbauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our next guest. We have the co-founder and co-CEO of CourseMojo, Dacia Toll. Dacia, welcome.
Hello, nice to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I was previewing for you a little bit about the conversation today, and I called myself an ultimate fangirl of a lot of your career. There's so many great things I think we could talk about today. Should we jump right in?
Would love to.
All right, Dacia, I'm curious how you came to be the personal and professional version of yourself.
Okay. Well, there's a whole part of the story that starts before I was 26, but maybe we could talk about that one over drinks. I would say my work in education really started with, I don't know, I have to decide where to start. That's the hardest part of this whole thing. What do you recommend?
So a lot of folks talk about like people in their lives who their own education background and experience, right? It's an education.
So it actually does go all the way back.
Yeah. So a lot of folks are like, I literally interviewed someone last week and they said, my teacher told me you'll never amount to anything. You'll never be anything. And now they're like this incredible educator with a PhD and they're in politics. And they said like, I could have let that break me. They sent me to summer school, and then this summer school teacher was like, "Oh my gosh, why would a teacher ever say that?" And so that's the kind of story a lot of
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay. Totally. But you could also just talk about like,
I got it. I got it now.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So I've always been interested in impact. Someone said like, that's my love language. And
I love that.
It's always been a question of like, what's the right way to have an impact. Originally, I thought that was through civil rights and becoming a lawyer. And so I actually was in law school, focused on becoming a lawyer, because a lot of people don't go to law school for that reason, and was looking at the issues of inequity that I cared so much about. But the more you looked at, the more they were downstream of fundamentally unequal investments we make in young people in this country. And that the kids who most need great public schools are the least likely to get them, unfortunately. The kids that most need the most effective teachers are least likely to get them. And it just seemed like, why focus on all of the downstream impacts when I was in New Haven, Connecticut, and there were, unfortunately, in our community, 25% of kids were reading at grade level. And so it was not just me, there was a whole group of us that sort of rallied around doing something for students in our community. Connecticut had just passed charter legislation. So while we actually tried initially to work with the New Haven public schools, that didn't work. And so there was this sense of like, oh yeah, you think, the famous Malcolm X quote, if you think someone should be doing something about this, maybe that someone is you.
Yeah.
And it certainly wasn't just me individually, but there were a team of about 30 of us, parents, teachers, a couple of us at the law school, and a lot of community leaders who started a school. And that sort of started the whole journey. And when I graduated from law school, I became a teacher. And that I will always be grateful for that one decision. And then so many others that came after that. There wasn't a plan for a charter network at the time. We were just trying to create a great school for kids in our community. And then I just kept following that question of what next do I think would have the impact that I hope it will.
So you obviously made a big pivot from the sector of becoming a lawyer into education. How has the influence of what you studied as a lawyer influenced the later works now of founding and leading schools and running a tech company. Do you see that influence throughout your work today, or is it something that it inspired you in the beginning and you've more moved on to other areas of focus?
I think it was more a values-based emphasis on equity. I know that's not a word we should be using these days, but I still use it.
I was going to say, I'm not going to stop using it. So you're in good company.
And so I think, it starts with that. It starts with a mandate, I think, especially in this country. And but then as a practical matter, I don't, fortunately, I have not had to use anything like legal skills.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought up this concept of, it being a calling for you. You even someone said impact is your love language, which I really, really enjoy that. I think that might be the title of this episode. So thanks for naming that already. But I'm curious what you started building in New Haven, Connecticut, and the subsequent growth of the Achievement First charter school network. For those that are maybe unfamiliar, which I'm not a large portion of our audience is unfamiliar, but can you explain the achievement growth model and how it expanded over time during your tenure at the network?
So we started with 84 kids in New Haven, Connecticut, on the corner of James and Lombard. And it was like, we talked a lot about team and family, and it was such a strong community. That school then grew to be 300 students and more grades. And then we had 8 applicants for every open seat. And I used to be the gal who had to pull the names out of a box. Like, this is how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And parents would come and watch, and it was just a brutal process.
Right.
And it was pure luck. And, we don't believe in this country that access to a quality education should be based on luck. And so we had a member on our team who was so obviously a talented leader. And so we decided to open another school a mile away. And then I say with humility, as the person who was leading the original school, that school outperformed the school I was running, which was really high performing. So
sure,
it became this sense of like, there is something to this, that it's not just, I had this fear that opening additional schools would be like a photocopy machine.
Right. Diluted.
Each next school would have like a smudge on it, or somehow be a imperfect copy of the school before. But that just, I think what the second school really taught me, and then it only accentuated over time, is it's more like software development, and that there's version 1.0.
Yeah.
And then you get to like have that incredible gift of stepping back and saying, what's working, what's not working. And then you have the wonderful talents of a new leader and a new team, and they get to take it to the next level. And you get version 2.0 and version 3.0. And then because you learned so much at the other campuses, you get to go back and, improve your response at the original campus. And so we were, again, just focused on New Haven and doing right by kids in our community until we met Joel Klein, the chancellor in New York. And Doug McCurry, my incredible co-founder and co-CEO, and I went to go meet with Joel Klein in New York. And he was interested in expanding options for kids in New York. He viewed public charter schools as public schools. It was like a radical idea. And he said, listen, I want you to pay your rent and student achievement. And he had looked at the track record of Amistad and New Haven. And he said, how many schools can you open? And Doug and I sort of looked at each other and we're like, 3? And he's like, okay. And we were sort of off to the races. And he honored sort of everything that he said he would do. And he created the conditions, not just for us, but for a number of both charter leaders and traditional public school leaders. There was a whole new schools effort within at the time, the DOE, as it was called. And we were able to do some pretty special work there. And one of the things that's fun now is, in central Brooklyn, in Harlem, parents who didn't previously have choice now have a lot of quality choices. about where to send their kids to school. So that's the sort of equity paradigm we've been fighting for, where there would be a lot of quality options.
It's really interesting hearing that part of the story. I began teaching in New York in 2006 with Teach for America, and Teach for America began placing teachers in charter schools that very year. And Achievement First was one of the sites they placed in Brooklyn. One of our mutual friends taught that year that year he was in a public school. 2 years later, he went to Achievement First. But I had friends that were placed in Achievement First in 2006. And so I believe you came to New York in 2005. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was our
Okay.
first year.
So it was right when that expansion happened. And I don't think I knew the whole story of Amistad to more schools in Connecticut either. And I had visited Amistad. So for me, it's very fascinating as someone who also worked in a public charter school for a decade and founded schools within a network to see what the original kind of archetype for charter growth in New York, how it started, how it began, the ideas behind it. And I really like embrace the idea you're naming here about nervousness when you grow school networks, that each copy or each iteration will be diluted in quality. You used it you said photocopier. I always think about dilution. Like, do you lose the core? Even one thing I felt, and I don't know if you felt this, Dacia, was as you go from 1 grade to 2 grades, from 2 grades to 3, as the size of the staff grows, do you lose the cohesion between the staff and the team? That's always something you have to
It's certainly a risk. It's certainly a risk. And I think there's a natural way in which, like, as a family grows, you have to sort of figure out the new dynamics. And I learned a lot from some of our fabulous principals over the years, that when you just brought a level of intentionality to it, and in particular, you invited that founding team to help you figure it out, and they felt investment, you could at least significantly mitigate that.
Now, you are very experienced now, fast forward a couple years later, in growing teams, but what led to this big transition from you from the Achievement First Network into tech? Because it is, for many, a big jump, a big transition. I want to know a little bit about why you made the transition, what problem you were trying to solve, and then we can talk in a bit about where we are today with that problem you were trying to solve.
Yeah, so I was coming up on 20 years at Achievement First, and I think there are beautiful things about founder-led organizations, and there are uniquely dysfunctional things about founder-led organizations. And so the first and most important question for me is, what's best for Achievement First? And is it time for a new chapter, which I think, we had many chapters, and part of what defined us actually was a know better, do better kind of vibe. And I really can point to several of those. But at some point, I think there's only a place you can go with a new leader. And it felt like the right time to sort of pass the baton. And Doug transitioned out the year before I did, so we were sort of this incredible partnership. And for me, it was important to get schools through COVID. And so we got reopened and then transitioned. But as I was thinking about, okay, well, if this is what's best for Achievement First, like, what do I want to do? And I go back to the number one question for me, which was always impact. And I remember I took a list of like all the issues I cared about. And initially, the one that really resonated, sort of both emotionally and intellectually, was what I'd heard from our high school students. We were, like many, committed to running small to medium-sized high schools that were powerful communities for kids. But as a result, we couldn't offer them everything they wanted. And they we offered a lot of APs, but not the cool APs. They wanted career exploration and career pathways. Why is Spanish the only world language we get to use? And I wanted all of that for them too, but it felt initially impossible to do that. And I think maybe the only silver lining of COVID is that I'd seen some amazing Achievement First teachers teach effectively online, and it kind of blew my mind. So the original version of CourseMojo was synchronous online classes, not developed during a pandemic, but developed
Right.
with intentionality.
Yep.
In a really, frankly, a co-teaching model where there was an in-person learning coach who was not the content expert, and an amazing content expert online teacher, and they co-taught, and they made it possible for there to be cybersecurity and entrepreneurship and AP environmental science and Mandarin, at every campus. And so that was the original version. While it's possible to do it well, it was hard to do it. And
all about
because,
this topic.
as you know, and we got asked, as you know well, we got asked to do shortage areas, which I know you also know. I mean, you're frankly further down this journey than I am, and with a lot of respect for what Full Mind does. And so we were trying to solve some of the same problems. In the context of that, we started working on AI tools to support kids and teachers in our classes. And then they sort of embedded tutors and embedded teaching assistants.
Right.
Some of our school partners were like, hey, can we have that outside of the context of the classes that you're offering? And then we started piloting Mojo, this AI powered teaching assistant, the only one that's curriculum aligned. We can get into that more. And then had to make a hard choice. Like, I think it is hard to try to do two things really well. To commit the level of heart and soul and focus that's required. And there were other folks like Full Mind that were already doing that problem, already addressing the synchronous class need. And so we made the hard pivot and have gone all in now for the last 18 months on developing these AI supports instead. And
in some ways, you were really predicting a future that is coming to reality today, which is really AI driven supports and tools forcing the hand of moving forward faster in education. So let's talk about it, because I know, first of all, I love the name Mojo. It's so cute. And the little icon always makes me smile. But let's talk a little bit about why you really set yourself apart, and you name specifically here that it's curriculum aligned, and I know specifically HQAM aligned. How, why, and what are you seeing in schools as they implement the tool?
Yeah. So I think there are AI visionaries who say, oh, we're going to transform teaching and learning and go to this whole new paradigm. Maybe, but that's not what we're focused on right now. And frankly, it is really, for the people who know me, it is surprising that I am running an edtech company, because I was really an edtech skeptic, I still am, frankly. And I think the vast majority of products overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah.
And what we're focused on is, I think a lot of schools, as embedded in the high quality instructional materials, already have a very ambitious vision for what they want the student and teacher experience to be. Like, this combination of small group collaborative work, full group Socratic seminar discussions, and lots of authentic writing and peer collaboration and rich discourse where we're building background knowledge and building vocabulary and critical thinking about text. And it's just hard to do. And it's especially hard to do. Like, we're focused at the middle school level, where it used to be before COVID, there was a 5 grade level span between the most struggling reader and the most advanced reader. And after COVID, there's now a 7 grade level span. Like, teachers have always known that there was a differentiation sort of mandate and challenge, but it's just exploded after COVID. And we know what's happened with, the number and the diversity of multilingual learners. And so when teachers are saying, hey, there's a mismatch between what this curriculum calls for, what I want the classroom experience to be, and the needs of all of the students in my class. And then with the amount of teacher turnover we've had, sometimes the skill and experience of the teacher. And so we didn't want a typical ed tech solution that sort of was supplemental to all of that and said, okay, you teacher deal with all of that. And then for 20 minutes a day, log in and do this other thing.
Sure.
And so we are embedding AI in that core classroom experience in a way that it's the same text, the same questions, the same writing assignments that the kids would otherwise be doing. But now, as a kid said to me, it's like the handout is talking to me. And so
Please tell me that's on your website now. What a testimonial right there.
Mojo, basically, kids are working together in partners or small groups, which is something we're religious about, back to that's what we want to make even more possible and effective. And they're talking to each other, and then they're each sort of like the handout typing their response into Mojo, and then Mojo affirms and pushes. And we're getting kids to just stay in the game and for these rich, beautiful texts to kind of keep peeling the onion and going deeper in their level of understanding, because Mojo is there to kind of nudge and support them in getting to unlocking the next level of understanding. And doing that for 15 or 20 minutes together as kids, while the teacher has a live dashboard showing every student's level of understanding of every question, and can be way more strategic in focusing on the 15% of kids who, for that text on that day, need their support. And then the teacher pulls on a bunch of analysis tools and says, what are the two most common misconceptions in this class right now? And what are suggested discussion questions? So we're trying to then have the class discussion part be even more rich and inclusive. So from the kids' side, the students say that they feel far more comfortable participating in a class discussion after working with Mojo. The teacher knows not just generically what's in the lesson plan for me to focus on, but specifically, what do this group of students most need to talk about? Then they can pull exemplary student work to celebrate student responses. They can group kids heterogeneously to support each other. It's fun because we're building out a whole set of additional teacher tools based on teacher feedback right now to help not just teacher efficiency. Like, I'd love to save teachers time. And we do some of that, but actually teacher efficacy and teacher enjoyment.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's, I agree that they're both and important, not just, you can't have one standalone from the other. Dacia, you've obviously dedicated your career to doing things that matter for kids, and really specifically all kids. I'm curious, from like your sage on the stage, which I know is probably not your teaching style, but your sage on the stage perspective, what would you say, how does AI drive equity in schools today? Like, there's a lot of debate about, the pros and the cons, but you're obviously betting on this. So let's talk about, for someone who's as dedicated and passionate about impact and equity as you are, how does AI permit that? And how does AI allow for that?
Yeah, I certainly, when it comes to tech and AI, do not think of myself as a sage on the stage. I think where I would answer your question honestly is, I'm as much concerned about AI's potential impact on student learning and the students we care as I am excited and bullish. And I think the answer is, it's not going to be one or the other. It's going to be some of both. And part of what I care about most is that educators stay in the driver's seat here. And part of how we are trying to develop, the best version of an AI product is by co-developing it with kids and teachers and school leaders. And so it's not even just what I learned over 20 plus years doing this work, but what we are learning together, and therefore what we're building. I do think, as an underlying technology, AI does two things that we're trying to harness for good. One is it can evaluate open-ended student responses. So we are now freed from a world of multiple choice. Because it used to be, edtech had to be rule-based. If you do this,
yes,
if kids do this, then this thing happens. If they do this other thing. So we had to constrain what they could do because we couldn't build out the decision trees. Now that's not true. Now we can actually, you can have a conversation, or the kids often like to just text and chat with Mojo the way they would otherwise. And that informal part of the conversation when they're grappling with meaning, I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Then they can get multiple rounds of feedback on their more formal writing. So I think there are ways in which that's a game changer. The other thing AI does is it analyzes large amounts of unstructured data almost instantly. So if the kids have their work, some of their work at least, in Mojo or another platform, you get this instant ability to surface trends that you can then act on. And you get this instant ability to figure out who needs what kind of support, which it used to be, teachers would have to bring home all the exit tickets, grade all the exit tickets, figure out what needs to be retaught the next day. If the kids had to revise their work, that was a whole separate other, just super complicated protocol.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do now is to figure out how to help teachers do the things they would like to do, but to make it easier and more effective, like figuring out a trend in student work and acting on it.
I'm picturing the tote bag that used to contain all those exit tickets and tests I had to grade that I would tote with me with my friends after school on Friday and wherever we went after school, and then would come home to my apartment and then I would sit and grade. The days of that tote bag are no more, perhaps, or maybe less. They're fewer. Dacia, I'm going to make a pivot really quickly because I want to make sure we have a little bit of time to touch on this. But, while you're talking about teachers being at the center and humans still driving this work in the age of rapid technological development, I know you also wear another hat, which is you sit on the board of Relay Graduate School for Education, which is an organization I really deeply respect. Why I respect it has to do with the approach you're taking to educating future teachers. And I am just curious, for folks that are unfamiliar, what makes Relay different, and then where is it going in the coming years that folks can be as excited as me about the trajectory?
Oh, I love talking about Relay. It has been one of the great joys of my life to play a small part in Relay's development. Relay is, according to a number of studies, the most impactful teacher prep program, I think, available right now.
I'm like taking a moment of applause for that.
Yeah,
that is amazing.
And the most diverse, or one of the most diverse. I mean, there has been a real focus on supporting a wide variety of folks to not just become teachers, but become really effective teachers. And in terms of what makes what we're doing different, it's been an emphasis on practice. And absolutely, there's a part of teaching that is intellectual and emotional, and Relay attends to that. But there also is, and there are also a set of effective teaching moves that Relay practices, and I think similar to the way many of us have evolved, that are both generally effective when it comes to creating strong classroom cultures, and that are content specific. And so it's been that combination of building strong content knowledge and practicing to the point of fluency, effective teacher moves, that has resulted in, and in the context of a strong, very supportive community, that's resulted in a lot of effective teachers. And a lot of, as you probably know, Relay's leadership programs are also really well respected. And I think similarly at a leadership level, how do we define effective leader practice? Let everybody bring their own special sauce to it, but have it be based on such a strong core group of fundamentals that you do enough in the context of training that you then are able to go back having internalized them.
One thing that has really stuck out to me when I was talking to their former CEO, Mamie, was that, or president, excuse me, was that Relay's really applying practices that are known as effective and scalable in other fields to the practice of teaching teachers, which hasn't evolved significantly prior to Relay's creation. And that got me really excited because I often feel like we stagnate in education, and we just do what we've always done, which I mean, we could talk for days about that topic, but specifically when it comes to educating our future teachers, I love that there is a great model that has grown tremendously, that has taken best practice from other industries, and that it really is changing the landscape of what we can expect or what we should expect teacher prep programs to look like.
Oh, thank you. I think that that is a credit to the pretty incredible Relay team. And so they've done that. And you asked sort of where Relay's headed.
Yeah, please.
They're we are sort of building out. The original focus was on teacher prep. Over time, it's expanded to be a number of leadership programs, and now ongoing teacher professional learning in that content specific way. And then Relay's also working on AI powered tools. So there's an AI powered teaching simulator to help with that practice, so that you can practice with real student avatars.
I was hoping you'd share about this. This is what I was alluding to. So, this is what doctors do all the time, right? They use, and pilots do this, and that's how they become better. You get more at bats at the thing you're trying to perfect.
You got it. And right now that's been exclusively human powered. And I don't think we're ever going to lose that completely, but sure. There's a way to get more at bats in the context of this simulation, as well as feedback from your colleagues and coaches. So that's
so exciting. Yeah, it's so exciting. And it gives me a lot of optimism for the landscape and how it can continue to evolve and better meet the needs of learners. Which ultimately we all say we're here for, and you're really like putting the pedal to the metal, as my mom used to say. Dacia, I think for my final question, it's logical to ask you what advice you would give a new teacher starting their career today.
First, I think we need to be actively cultivating new teachers to enter the profession today. I think it is still one of the greatest opportunities to have impact, and to have it in that way that you and I both know it is intellectually challenging, but it's also emotionally, let's be honest, challenging at times, but rewarding. And it's really a leadership opportunity. I think this is one of the things that Teach for America got right so many years ago, which is it's an invitation to leadership. And you have one of the greatest responsibilities for a chapter in their life, sort of shaping a young person's trajectory, and identity, and lots of other absolutely critical, important things in a way that impacts not just that individual, but what kind of society we become, and their future leadership. So I think my advice would be to connect to what we were talking about with Relay, to understand the art and science of teaching, and that there are some truly effective practices that, as fast as possible for your own sake, you should try to figure out how to give precise directions and create a strong classroom community, as well as how to deeply understand your content. And the best teachers do that based on their own set of values. And when you look at the teachers that are really transformative, they absolutely had mastery of effective practices, but they had such a deep belief and commitment to the students they worked with. And they then figured out a way to bring their own quirky or geeky or silly personality to it, whoever they were. And it's that sort of authenticity that students respond to. And then I would embrace the potential of AI, not get stuck in a hype cycle about it. There's plenty of that. And really critically evaluate what you think is going to set you and your students up to be more successful in the long term. And because you will have already do, and it will only get worse, a sort of dizzying array of tools that you could try, and to use your judgment to figure out, to test and to reject, I think, quite a few of them, and then figure out which ones are really making the difference.
Those are some true words. I am so grateful, Dacia, that you shared your time with us here today. Your experience and your passion is really inspiring, and I personally am grateful to have learned from you. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And thank you for everybody for tuning in. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.